Okay, so how much land does a man need? Just talking about does a man need? Talking about characterization. Okay, so you got this fellow by the name of Pahom. So the time is around the 1860s. And why this is important is that feudal serfdom ended in Russia, and so people could actually own land. Was what? That's wonderful. Okay? So, in the 1860s in Russia, feudal serfdom ended, and so you didn't have to work under a lord anymore. You could work your own field, and in fact, the fields were given over to the peasants. They were able to have a very small amount, at like maybe 5 acres or so on, and they would take that and they would sell it. So, there's four main characters here. You've got Pahom, you've got the devil, you've got his wife, and you've got his sister, the wife's sister. Okay? So Pahom, of course, is the protagonist. And he's a very round character and a very dynamic character. He changes, mostly because of these two ladies. So talking about the wife believes, and this is very common back in the day, that it's morally good to work hard. And she is not ashamed of her somewhat poverty. So she's kind of a good woman, and you'll see through the story, Pahom kind of distances himself more and more from her as the story goes on, as his own kind of moral beliefs distance from her, all the way to the end. The sister, on the other hand, is very cosmopolitan. She's got money, and she says that's the most important thing. Money. Whereas the wife says, I think she says something like, the brother of gaining is losing. So, like, whenever you gain something, you're always going to lose it as well. And ultimately, that's the truth with Pahom. So the devil really is a kind of interesting character. He kind of jumps in and out as various temptations. And you'll see this with a lot of short stories like The Devil and Tom Walker, where, this Devil and Tom Walker is kind of an American parallel to How Much Land Does a Man Need? It's a guy, he lives in Massachusetts, he runs he goes out, he's really poor, he goes out to the woods, he meets Old Scratch, in other words, the devil, and the devil says, hey, why don't you become a slave trader? And the guy's like, nah, I'm not really interested in that. So he says, okay, well, I'll give you the next best thing. I'll make you a mortgager, right? You can mortgage off, you can loan money to people and take it from them when they don't pay you back. And so the guy goes, okay, and he becomes really, really rich, and he carries Bibles with him all the time so that he can ward off the devil if the devil does show up. And at the end of the story, Tom Walker, he is at his office, and what is it? He's at his office, and he has one Bible on his desk and one on his coat that he's left on his desk chair. And he opens the door, and the devil's there at the door of his loan office. And the devil grabs him and throws him on the back of a horse, hits the horse in the butt, and the horse goes running all the way to hell. And all of Tom Walker's money is transformed into ashes. Okay, so much the same way, Pahom, he goes, and at the beginning, he's kind of proud of being poor. He doesn't really mind it. And he's kind of devoted to his wife, who feels the same way. But the wife and the sister kind of get into a debate about poverty. Well, not poverty, but about not having money. And so Pahom gets interested in this, and he starts to attain wealth. And some of the reason why he attains wealth is because of the devil's influence. There are people that walk down the street, and they walk up to him and say, "Hey, brother, how are you doing today?" And Pahom goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing fine." He's like, "Hey, I heard if you spend a little bit of money on this, you'll get you this land for cheap." And so Pahom buys some land, and he gets some wealth, and he starts to become kind of a bad person, to the point where he's like taxing people, and if people come on his land, he goes to the officials and he runs after them. So on, so he begins to attain wealth some more. And again, this is from the devil's influence. And then finally we get to the end, and what is the whole scheme that ends up in the death of Pahom? Someone want to tell me? Charles. No, not at all? Nothing there? Okay. How about Trevor? Did you read it? Okay, so finally you have this guy called, well, I hope you do read it, because
I will. I
okay.
haven't gotten to it yet.
You have this guy who's way out in the middle of nowhere, like the beginning of Siberia. He's called the Bashkir Elder, and he's the only person of the Bashkirs that can speak Russian, right? And he says, basically, from the beginning of the day to the end, however much land you can go and make in a square will be your land for this price. But if you cannot complete the square, you lose everything. Okay? And so what happens is you have Pahom. He goes and they give him a shovel, and they say, mark the corners of the square with the shovel. So, you know, Pahom's kind of an old guy, but he's running and he's going here. And he says, okay, it's about 10:30, so that's a third. And then he starts running and he goes here, and then maybe it's 1 o'clock, right? And he starts running and he's, okay, it's maybe 3:35, okay. Then he starts running back and the sun starts to set. And the sun's setting and setting and setting and setting and setting. And as he's running, he's exerting more and more strength. More and more of his life force is fleeting away. And so as he gets to almost to the very end, he dies. Okay? And the irony of the whole story is, how much land does it take to bury somebody? Anybody? 6 feet, 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide, 6 feet deep. So the irony is he went for all this land. He went to go and get all of this land, so many acres of land, and yet what does he end up in? He ends up in a 6-foot plot that's dug by a worker with him that uses the same shovel that he was marking the land with. Okay, so it's kind of a work of irony as well, that the devil gets exactly what he wants. He doesn't change. He's a static character. Okay, Pahom, on the other hand, becomes more and more greedy as the story goes on, and eventually his own greed kills him. Okay, so that's kind of a look at how much land does a man need, and the ideas and the characterization behind that short story. It's very Russian. Like Russians, they always talk about moralism and punishment for false ideas, like for example greed and so on. So it's very kind of representative of Russian moralism, I guess you'd call it. Well, before communism came, and then everything got thrown out the door. All right, any questions about that?